Right, so another week, another massive, brand new scandal erupting for Keir Starmer's Labour, and this time it really is an old rehashing of an old problem that always seems to afflict right-wingers. Frankly, this sort of scandal should be an obvious indicator of being right-wing, of being bought and paid for. And it really does explain why the economic narrative is a carbon copy of every excuse George Osborne coughed up as to why we, the ordinary working class people of this country, have to be kept poor, because it's only by our poverty that rich people stay rich. And when they have special access to government, cash for access, as this scandal is once again, when Keir Starmer goes ahead and makes his speech later today at time of writing that amounts to things can only get worse for us, it should serve as a reminder that when rich people can turn up on his doorstep anytime they like, all the more so when they are party donors, you realise what those donations effectively pay for, and wonder no more about why Labour cannot countenance or fathom the point of a wealth tax. Starmer's Labour might have stopped the Tory gravy train, but only long enough for them to get on board themselves.
Dodgy contracts, privileged access, jobs for their mates. This is the return of Tory sleaze.
Right, so as Keir Starmer prepares to make another one of his bland and boring speeches today at time of writing, there he was laying into the Tories for sleaze, and yet it's taken mere weeks for him to be embroiled in another sleaze row, and all of his own making. He will basically be telling us that although he stood on a platform for change, the change for us ordinary working class folk won't amount to a hill of beans when the message is very much not things are going to get better, but things are very much going to get worse instead. And all after 14 years of the Tories making our lives worse and worse and worse as it was. Still, despite this already having been widely debunked, Starmer will tell us that the inherited mess of the Tories, things are worse than they could possibly have imagined. Exactly what George Osborne and David Cameron said and repeated for years and years, as things never got any better. It's jammed tomorrow once again. That's what the message will be. And frankly, the more Starmer and Reeves harp on about that, the more worried people are going to get, and rightly so. We also know that this is the sixth richest economy on earth, yet despite that it has barely grown for years, broadly flatlining as our economy has. A 0.1% rise here, a 0.2% rise there, with a little bit of deflation in between. It's nothing to speak of. Yes, the Tories were an economic disaster, no argument here about that. They were cold and callous and cruel when they went about it too, and rewarded their mates with crony contracts, and public money was spent like water. That's historical fact. We know all of this. They always do it though whenever they get into power. But here is Labour not offering any change from that, actually offering more of the same. And it's very difficult to countenance hardship for all of us again carrying on when more money in our pockets boosts the economy, triggers growth, because we will use that money, we will spend that money, we will make that money work. But with the sixth richest economy with pathetic growth for one major reason, and that is all the wealth is hoarded at the top, where it sits in accounts somewhere, doing nothing. Economically inactive wealth. Most of the wealth of this country does nothing but essentially sit on its backside. Take some of that money, that lazy money as we could perhaps think of it in terms of, put it in the pockets of those with the least. It'll get spent that way, it'll work for the economy again, and we'll see growth for the nation. It's been said so many times by so many credible economists, not just me blithering on about it, but it's a very easy concept we should all be able to grasp. Money has to work, just like we all have to work to get by in life. Money has to work, has to be used, has to be spent for shops to do well, wages to be paid on, that tax will then be paid on, goods bought that tax will then be paid on as well. Money being used in such a way that it generates a return for the government, freeing them up to spend more on all the things we all need, the goods and services we use in our everyday lives. That is why a healthy economy is important. That is why a wealth tax can kickstart that brilliantly. And Labour could do this and be different to the Tories and be the change they promised they would be. But instead they're going to carry on exactly as the Tories did before, as if they had never left office. And in fact, with a Chancellor such as Rachel Reeves, things could even be made harder and made worse. But why? Why must they be like the Tories as well? And the answer has just come in the form of yet another scandal, exposing the truth of the matter. Labour behaving like the Tories is because they are now being funded exactly like the Tories. And that has just been exposed over the small matter of a Downing Street pass. Getting into Downing Street, well, You can't just walk down there, can you? Police in the way. Gates. It's frowned upon attempting to do so. You do need a security pass to be let in. Secure access to Downing Street. Well, you can only imagine the checks that have to be done to allow non-ministers in, can't you? You can't just let anyone in. Except that is exactly what Keir Starmer has done, it seems, and their version of events to excuse this have been, well, inconsistent, to say the least. Security passes, of course, need to be held by ministers, and obviously civil servants who work in Downing Street and or need access at times. The running a government obviously requires that. Why Keir Starmer's biggest personal donor, and a man who gave the party £500,000, had such a security pass so he could enter Downing Street whenever he wished, is a bigger issue. If people can be seen to be able to buy a security pass by donating to the party now in government, but only 7 weeks in, then we're back in cash for access scandal territory already. And indeed, in relation to my earlier point, if donations are the reason a wealth tax won't be considered by Labour, and we all have to suffer even more after 14 years of Tory austerity that we've already endured, having a wealthy man able to bend Starmer or whoever's ear whenever he likes with such access to Downing Street, able to turn up and go in whenever he likes, as he evidently has or had, depending on which Labour version of events you believe, if either of them, is surely tantamount to ongoing lobbying on that subject. The donor at the centre of the storm is long-time Labour donor Lord Wahid Ali. Ali is a former investment banker, because of course he is. He's also a former TV mogul as well, having created the concept of the Survivor series and also Channel 4's Big Breakfast. He was also chair of online retailer ASOS. He got given a peerage by Tony Blair back in 1998 at the age of just 33, Ali having been his advisor to him on what the youth of the day wanted. Well, I was 20 in 1998 and I didn't want Blair, so there, that went unanswered, didn't it? Anyway, Ali has also been a key player in Keir Starmer's camp, having been the chair of the election fundraising campaign, and had himself, as aforementioned, given £500,000 to Labour since Keir Starmer became leader in 2020. He's also donated personally to Starmer, having literally dressed the man, it would seem, with a £16,800 donation for work clothes, so suits then, and some £2,825 for multiple pairs of glasses, and coughed up some £36,400 for office costs and accommodation during the general election campaign. Now that is all well and good, but it sure as hell doesn't account for why Ali should ever have been given a security pass for Downing Street. He organised a post-election celebration on the Downing Street, or in the Downing Street garden even, after Labour's win, for those who helped bankroll Labour's campaign, so a knees up for the donors. Nobody save the person who granted Ali that security pass, and Ali himself know why he was even given one. Several civil servants have said anonymously, apparently, that they have no idea how this man has such a pass. These passes are reserved for the staff who work in Downing Street, the civil service, ministers who obviously need access, and the families of those who live there. Nobody else should require one, so why does a donor have one? Well, Labour were in full-on waffling spin mode on this morning, with Starmer loyalist Pat McFadden saying that actually it wasn't unusual for him to have had a security pass, saying that he thinks he had one but doesn't have it now. And this is in dispute of what has been said by those who broke the story, who prior to publication stated that Ali very much still has a pass, although it might be temporary, might be, not sure. Frankly, until it runs out, or until Ali or someone else states when it expires, what it was issued for, this all very much looks like another cash for access scandal. A donors paying for access scandal. And with those on the receiving end of his donations, not just Starmer, but also including Angela Rayner and David Lammy and Bridget Phillipson as well, not wishing to lose such funding, especially with Labour membership collapsing as it is, membership dropping by 9% in just the last year. Labour is more reliant than ever on donors. So why are there others getting special access like Wahid Ali? Because Labour need to keep them sweet. And even if he isn't using that position to lobby against wealth taxes or similar moves against wealthy people like himself, as this could ostensibly look like, with Labour more reliant on private donations now that it is losing members, is the effect not the same, and are the optics of it all no less damaging? Let's also not forget that this latest donor scandal comes hot on the heels of another one in the last couple of weeks, only of Rachel Reeves herself doing, where she literally gave a job in the Treasury to one of her donors, literally made a guy who had given her £5,000 and had donated more than £20,000 to Labour over the last 10 years, a Treasury director. I really don't know why they think they can get away with it, because they won't. And having been found out, the guy in question in that instance, Ian Corfield, has stood down from the paid role to become an unpaid advisor. But the damage has already been done. And here we are again now with more questions to Starmer's Labour relating to the preferential treatment getting offered to significant donors to the party, and all within less than 2 months of them taking power. Who exactly is in charge here is the question we are all justifiably asking once again of our government. Who is the country being run in the interest of with things like this happening? And when we are all being told to get ready to have to tighten our belts yet again, and the rich aren't getting a wealth tax inflicted on them because Rachel Reeves says she can't see the point of one. She can't see the point of one as opposed to kids being left in poverty or pensioners being robbed of their winter fuel allowance. With this going on, Labour can't afford to lose its donations and therefore cannot afford to implement a wealth tax, is the conclusion so many of us are reaching. Therefore, the majority of the country must suffer, so the rich can keep on getting richer. We have a bought and paid for political system where only Labour or the Tories ever get into power, and both now being utterly reliant on big money to fund them. Who really is running the country here? This seems to be, in no uncertain terms, why a wealth tax will not be implemented, and why one only will be implemented when we stop voting into power the same parties that are bought and paid for. Starmer's got a lot of explaining to do, and with 2 versions of this story floating around already as to how Ali got his security pass, it looks set to get a lot messier yet before we get to the bottom of it, because someone somewhere must clearly be lying about it already. If Labour thought their approval ratings were bad already, they're going to get a heck of a lot messier in light of this latest scandal, and that's before we even get to October's budget, which coming the day before Halloween is set to be a horror story for many people. And seemingly this is one major reason at least as to why that might be. But with those ratings already having fallen by double digits in just the last few weeks, and not even having been in power, as I said, for 2 months yet, Starmer's government could be one of the most short-lived going, and he only has himself to blame for it. Enjoy the freebies while they last, Keith. Get the details of all of that in this video recommendation here as your next watch. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.